Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also at 21stCenturyWire.com. We're also streaming out live a special video edition on X, Twitter platform. We're also streaming out on YouTube, Rumble, and our Facebook page there at 21wire.tv. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this special broadcast. Really appreciate it. We've got a fantastic group of guests going to be joining us. We're going to be covering geopolitical hotspots. This is episode 495 of the Sunday Wire. Again, I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Now, we're going to be joined in the first few minutes. We're going to welcome onto the stage a diplomat representing the country of Yemen to talk about the situation as it's breaking right now in and around the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, and also talking about the axis of resistance, their position on geopolitical and regional matters right now as they stand. And we're also going to be joined by international journalist Chay Bowes in the first hour. And I'm going to be looking forward to that discussion with Chay. We're going to cover Ukraine. We're going to look at history. And we're going to ask the question, why are the U.S. traditionally, historically, always backing extremists around the world, whether it's in Ukraine or whether it's backing al-Qaeda factions in different parts of the world? Why is the United States always backing the extremists? We'll talk to Chay about that and more. Looking forward to that. It's going to be a very informative segment with Mr. Bowes, Irish journalist. Fantastic work he does with RT and also independently as well. Now, I want to welcome onto the stage our very special guest right now. He is from the country, representing the country of Yemen. He's going to join us right now onto the stage. I want to welcome onto the program our special guest in just a moment as we connect him. His name is Yasser Almohallil, and he's going to join us on the live link in just a moment as soon as we get his connection set. I want to welcome Yasser to the stage right now, and if we can just make sure we've got his audio. Yasser, welcome to the program.
Hello, Patrick. Thank you so much for inviting me to your show, and thanks to your audience as well.
No, thank you very much. Very much appreciate it, Yasser. And we have, because of your internet connection, there'll be some delay on the video, but hopefully we'll work our way around that. But we do have a very good audio signal. Yasser, thank you for joining us. You are a diplomat. You're working in the Foreign Affairs Department with Yemen. And tell us, explain us the current situation right now as it stands in the Red Sea. What is Ansar Allah's position as things have developed quite rapidly in the last week? If you could just walk us through the current situation as your government sees it. Go ahead, Yasser.
Yeah, Patrick, now what's happening in Palestine is heartbreaking, actually, and Yemeni people and Yemeni leadership could not just stand and just watch what's happening, slaughtering people, killing a lot of civilians in Gaza, slaughtering children, bombing hospitals, and also bombing mosques, besieging Gaza like no medicine, no food can be allowed to enter to Gaza Strip. And there is a real massacre that's happening in the Gaza Strip because of Israel is intending to kill every single person in Gaza. And this situation couldn't be just silenced by the Yemeni people, because if we have been in such a situation, as you know, Patrick, during the last 9 years of the coalition, the what's so-called the Arab coalition war against Yemen, we know how hard it is to just be under bombardments, to be under siege, to be not allowed to have your simplest rights of humanitarian rights, and all of these things, just motivated the people of Yemen to stand in solidarity with the people of Gaza and of the people of Palestine. Of course, our leader Said Abdul Malik al-Houthi have in his first speech after the October 7th happened in Palestine, he talked about how the Yemeni people will get engaged in this battle if the West, if the US going to just keep supporting the Israelis to keep their murdering of the Palestinian people. And he warned the Western countries not to fully engage with Israelis' crimes, and they have to push towards stopping these crimes against the Palestinian people. But what happened was on the contrary, unfortunately. The U.S., helped the Israelis, with major weapons, and they, but all their capabilities for the Israelis to keep on the killing of the Palestinian people. In this moment, Yemeni people and their leadership decided to take action against these atrocities happening. Of course, we started, the people of Yemen, or the military, the Yemeni military started to launch ballistic missiles and drones towards Eilat, the occupied Eilat of Palestine. And when the crimes, took upgraded by the Israelis and took a new stage, of course we decided to just block all the shipping, to all these Israeli ships, or these ships heading to Israel, to the occupied Palestinian ports. And of course, this decision was, as we all have seen, it was welcomed inside Yemen. It was welcomed across the Arab world, even globally. A lot of people around the world, greeted these actions from the Yemeni people, and also they were they were just we have to take actions in the Red Sea. The Red Sea, as you can see, it's a critical Yemeni geographical position. It's very critical, and we have so many chances to just to tease or just to do a lot of things for the Palestinian people. When the first strikes started to target the Israeli ships, it was only targeting the Israeli ships, and those are heading to the Israeli or the occupied Palestine ports. But the United States of America and the United Kingdom, some of other Western countries decided to change the core of what's going on in the Red Sea into international shipping threats. For example, they said Yemenis are, putting threats for the international shipping in the Red Sea, and this is not true. And you can see this when this first happened in Palestine. Then there was a reaction from the Yemeni people. It's not like this came from nowhere and it happened. It just happened in the Red Sea. And I told you, during the last 9 years, we have been imposed to a very critical situation in Yemen. We have been bombed, we have been killed, but we did not, go close or decided to just hit the ships or to put threats in the Red Sea or in the international shipping of maritime in the Red Sea, because we believe that we can engage directly with these troops affiliated to the Saudis, and these troops affiliated to their puppets in the ground. We can fight with them. But when it comes that far to the Israeli to the occupied territories of Palestine, we only have this choice to stop this genocide within the engagement of the Red Sea, or what happened in the Red Sea. But after that, the US and the UK and some other countries that some of them are not even mentioned, like Bahrain and Seychelles Islands, decided to just form a coalition to stop these actions in solidarity with the Palestine people. But they really just made the situation worse, because the United States can, firmly know that they cannot stop the people of Yemen of what they're doing, and this is going to be a very big crisis for them, because before the engagement of the United States and the UK, their ships were not a target, Patrick. Now they are. So if they came to put a red lines, they really just removed all the red lines before the Yemeni people, and this is who's to be held responsible for this? It's the United States of America and the United Kingdom for pumping Yemen in a very critical violation of the international law. You cannot come, from overseas and from thousands of miles away to pump a country that have a sovereignty and have its own people under actually they are still under a war and under siege by the Saudis, their allies, the allies of the United States of America. But what happened during the last 9 years when they used all kind of weapons against my people, when they used all kind of and all means of siege against my people, they got nothing. They got no victory. They only got defeated, and they made the Yemeni people even more empowered with very developed missiles, very developed, war instruments. And now they are trying to just, to militarize the sea. And what's happening when you militarize the sea, you actually make a big crisis that you cannot, you don't know where it's going to be. And then, the United States right now thinks if they do these actions, they will just, make the people of Yemen just change their minds and, okay, just keep killing the Palestinian people and we will do nothing. No, we actually get motivated by the threats of the United States. We get more ready to confrontate with them. We don't actually, as a Yemeni people, we don't actually get scared or fear the threats of the United States. We know that the United States started the war against Yemen 9 years ago when it was announced from Washington, when the Saudi ambassador back then announced the war against Yemen from Washington, what's so-called decisive storm. And we know that the United States is directly and indirectly engaged to this war. They are subsidizing Saudi Arabia. They are, just giving them a lot of weapons to kill us. Now, what happened when they failed throughout their allies to subjugate the people of Yemen to their opinion, to what they want from the people, to get back, like just affiliated to the Saudis and to be a U.S. Followers. No, this is not acceptable for the Yemeni people anymore after the 21st of September revolution in Yemen. And now what's happening? What's happening is that the United States figured out that they have to launch a war against us themselves, and this is a very changing or dramatically changing position for the United States. But what's the result? What's the result of this war against Yemen by the UK and the US? It's not going to be any, and it's not going to be in their interest actually, because Yemeni people are, can stand in solidarity and steadfastness for a long time, and they will not hesitate. Now, they will not hesitate to protect the country, to protect their people. They will not hesitate to target all the interests of the United States in the region, and also the interests of the UK in the region. And if they want this crisis to stop, they should not just go and look how to form new coalitions to launch a war against the Yemeni people. They should do a humanitarian responsibility in the first place. They should go to Palestine and stop the slaughtering of Israeli army against Gazan people. They should immediately allow all the medicines, all the kind of food that the people of Palestine are in dire need of into the Gaza Strip, and this tension will, immediately end. And if they want to to upgrade this crisis, it will not be. It will actually be against their interest. and it will make the situation worse, of course.
So our understanding, Yasser, just according to international law, if you look at multiple UN resolutions, we're also looking at the Geneva Convention, the Genocide Convention as well, which is currently in The Hague. So the position of Ansar Allah, correct me if I'm wrong, but your government in Yemen is you're sanctioning Israel and you're backing up the sanctions with the seizure on of Israeli material support for a genocide heading towards Israeli ports. That's exactly what the United States have done and Britain have done in the past when they think that a country that they're sanctioning is doing something they don't like. They do seize their ships. They've done this to Iran and other countries. So you're basically doing, in accordance to international law, and you're imposing the same policy that even the United States has done in the past. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, Patrick. When we come to the international law, as it is for real, we our actions in Yemen are, go with the international law. It doesn't violate the international law because if you want to stop a genocide, real genocide, you should just act with all the means. You have to put pressure on the side who is making this genocide against the Palestinian people. And when you talk about a lot of people getting killed in Palestine, and in the contrary, you can't just stop this genocide by trying to see some shipping or international shipping towards the occupied Palestine ports. It means that you are doing something is not harmful. Actually, you're not actually deciding to kill civilians in the sea. You're not actually deciding to harm civilians, as you can, as everyone watched during the last couple of months when Galaxy Leader, the ship, was seized by the naval forces of Yemen. No one was harmed. Everyone was safe. Was clearly safe, but it was, an action of an action that is needed to stop the genocide against the people of Palestine. But when we come to the international law that's taking place by the perspective of the United States, they are just, trying to camouflage all this international law and what helps them to keep on this slaughtering of the Palestinian people, because the United States say there is no evidence of killing innocent people in Palestine. Can you imagine that, Patrick? Over 25,000 innocent people were killed in Palestine, and the Biden administration says it publicly to the whole world. There is no evidence of a deliberate Israeli killing innocent people. This is really insane. It makes you burn from inside. You want to do more than you're actually doing in the Red Sea, and of course we have to focus on how to stop this genocide against the Palestinian people. And what's in our hand right now is the Red Sea and the international shipping and the Red Sea. We are not imposing threats to the international shipping or the movement of maritime trade over the seas. We are imposing threats on the ships of Israel, of companies affiliated to Israel, or those are heading to the occupied Palestinian ports. And even before this, Patrick, the ships of the United States companies, or these are affiliated to the U.S. Shipping companies, were not a target. Even the ships of the United Kingdom were not a target. But after they decided to bomb Yemen, to violate our sovereignty, to kill our soldiers, that now they became a target, because this is what happens when you just target another country's sovereignty, when you target another country people. They don't think that we are this kind of people who will keep silent because the United States just introduce itself like the most powerful state in the world. No, we really don't fear the power of the United States when it comes to our safety, when it comes to our people's safety, when it comes to our sovereignty safety. Because how many people can the U.S. kill? Let's say if even if they use a massive bombs against our people, they cannot kill every single one, and they cannot shut people up, because they are standing in a very fair situation, in a very fair position, in a very humanitarian position, alongside with their with the oppressed people of Palestine. If they want, as we say, if they really want to just go with the international law and make something different than they are doing right now, I mean, the US and the UK, they should put an end for the slaughter of the people killing in Gaza. They should let humanitarian aid into Gaza, and this will immediately stop from the side of Yemen. We don't have to target more ships, or these are affiliated to the Israelis, because we believe that the United States is living with the crisis. They are not living with any other position. They like to see more crisis in the Middle East. They cannot just solve problems in the Middle East unless it comes with their interest. But our position doesn't come with their interest. As we speak, Patrick, the ongoing massacres against Gazan people is still on the ground, and Israeli troops are still killing every single person in Gaza. They're not just justifying their kills because they are killing Hamas or something. No, they are fighting every single kid or child in Gaza. They are fighting every single elderly people in Gaza. They are preventing people from having their essential needs, like having medicines, food, and everything that the human needs to stay alive. So if you don't kill them with a bullet, you kill them with a starvation. This is not acceptable. And if the Arab League today is facing all this crisis with a silent note, the Yemeni people will not stay silent while the people of Palestine are under a very tragic situation, and we're just watching them being killed and tortured and prevented from their essential needs. We will stay and we will continue this position of the Yemen. We will continue to target all the ships affiliated to the Israeli companies, and those are affiliated now to the US companies. Of course, even the warships of the United States are now a target for the Yemeni armed forces. And if they want to stop this arc of tension, like you titled your show today, they should immediately put an end of the genocide in Gaza and stop intervening in Yemeni's interests.
Well, it sounds a very straightforward policy. One would hope that Washington's diplomats could get together with Yemen's diplomats and come to some understanding or agreement, but that hasn't happened. We hope that it does happen, and we really appreciate you coming on to explain the position.
Yeah, actually,
Go ahead.
Patrick,
Go ahead, Yasser.
just to add a little bit, in this engagement, I'm telling you, the United States try to send messages to our diplomat outside, like Muhammad Abdul Salam, our chief of delegation, have announced a couple of days ago that they are receiving a lot of messages from the Western countries, the United States, from a third party. It's not a direct messages, but it comes from a third party. But they are asking our people and our leadership to stop these strikes against the ships of Israel or these affiliated to the USA, and there was a clear response to these third parties are delivering the message. These strikes will not be stopped until enough food and medicine are allowed to enter to the Gaza Strip, and if the United States is trying to isolate what's happening in the Red Sea from what's happening in Palestine. They will not be able to do this because there is no, even the international community doesn't go with the U.S. narrative according to what's happening in the Red Sea. They believe that even Guterres, the UN is believing that what's happening in the Red Sea is linked to what's happening in Palestine. Russia also stated with its senior officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that what's happening in the Red Sea will not be de-escalated unless the war against Gazan people is de-escalated and enough food and medicine are allowed to get into the Gaza Strip. The Chinese also, as well, they have stated that this tension in the Red Sea is linked and also is in a way or another to what's happening in Palestine. France did not approve to engage to this coalition that the U.S. have recently formed to comfort the people of Yemen. A lot of countries believe that are aware that this what's happening in the Red Sea is directly an engagement to what's happening in Palestine, and if the U.S. wants to to show themselves as the protector of the seas or because no background on what's happening in the Red Sea, this is not acceptable. And actually, people don't buy it, Patrick, and they believe that the United States of America and the UK are doing a very big mistake right now in the Red Sea, and the result of what are they doing is not going to be any in their good interest. And what they should do right now is stop any aggression against the people of Yemen, and to go to the Israeli cabinet, to the Israeli leadership, to ask them to stop their genocide against people of Palestine, because this is going, the ball of fire is going wider and wider. By the time Iraq is engaging in this tension, Lebanon is engaging in this tension, Iran recently have some actions. Maybe it can be for further engagement in this escalation. And if the United States are really, want to do something good for the region, for the Middle East, they should right now, convince the Israelis to stop their genocide and to bring back life to the Gazan people.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Yasser Almohallil. We really appreciate your
Thank you so much, Patrick.
And we hope to speak to you again in future with more updates, I hope. And thank you very much from myself and our audience.
I'm so gratitude. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Patrick, and thanks to your audience.
Thank you. Yasser Almohallil, diplomat from Yemen, explaining to us what the position is of his government right now in this very tense situation, which has the potential to escalate, as Yasser has explained, and not for any really good reason. Certainly, the blowback from this will be very difficult to contain, that's for sure. Now, I want to welcome onto the stage. We're not going to take a break. We're going to go straight through on this format. I want to welcome to the stage another guest, a journalist, an international journalist, and his name is Chay Bowes. We're going to bring him up in a moment to the broadcast. I think we have him on the line right now. Chay, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, Patrick. Nice to see you.
It's great to see you as well, Chay. I mean, we had a sort of docket of stuff we wanted to get through, but I know you were listening in on this conversation that we had with the Yemeni diplomat, and I want to give you a chance to respond to what you heard, especially the position of Russia and other countries and how they're seeing this situation right now in the Red Sea. Go ahead, Chay.
Yeah, I mean, look, to anybody who's followed the Middle East, as I have done for, 25 years closely and read about it a lot, it's no surprise that it's Britain and the United States who are forming the backbone of this alliance, as they call it, which is a unilateral force. There's no mandate from any sort of international body to take the action that they've been taking whatsoever. And your previous guest is absolutely correct. It's also interesting to me that the British and Americans had no desire to take any action whatsoever in Yemen since 2015, where this brutal war has raged, the worst humanitarian catastrophe on earth at the moment. Well over 10,000 people killed in the fighting, but a terrible humanitarian catastrophe, as in children, women. And this, also has a thread back to the early 60s as well, 1962, I think it was. I haven't read about it for a while, but immediately I see the British in Yemen or British warships in Yemen. I think about the British project in Yemen. And the British got involved in Yemen in the 60s after the post-colonial period where they'd stirred things up. And we'll talk about that probably later on in the Middle East in a wider context, all beginning with Mohammad Mossadegh, the legitimate leader of Iran. In 54, I think he was overthrown in a coup, a terrible dirty tricks war by the CIA, MI6, and British Petroleum, I think, to overturn his government, his legitimate government, because he wanted to nationalize the oil in Iran, which some people, and I believe, was the sort of catalyst for all of the current instability in the Middle East. I mean, because of what happened to Mossadegh's government, the Shah of Iran was brought back in by the Western powers covertly. He was a brutal dictator, and he was overthrown then by the Islamic government. So this is the engine of this. But in Yemen in particular, the British were involved in a covert war in Yemen from the 60s because the king of Yemen died and his son took over. And this was a feudal state, very brutally managed. And al-Badr, I think, was the name of the king at the time. His son lasted a week and he was overthrown by a Yemeni army colonel, Salil, I think his name was. And he was an Arab nationalist. And remember, at that time in the early 60s, the Middle East, Arab nationalism was burgeoning. And this was all under the sort of wing, if you like, of Gamal Abdel Nasser, this great Arab leader who wanted to unite the Arabs, and this was by far the biggest threat to the British Empire at the time, as the British Empire crumbled in South Africa. And in the South, the British arch enemy at the time was Nasser, the Egyptian leader. And this led them to support a sort of a covert action to destabilize Yemen. So the British sort of project in Yemen goes back a long way. It's nothing new. So when people see British destroyers and American destroyers in the Red Sea, two things I'd suggest they should think. Where were they when this war began in 2015? Which I could easily tell you about the reasons why Yemen is so destabilized. Why is nobody calling out the British for supplying the weapons? The British RAF is complicit in war crimes in Yemen for bombing children. And it's the United Nations that says that, Patrick, not Chay Bowes or Patrick Henningsen or your previous guest. The United Nations has consistently tried to trace and track down the realities of the war. But nobody from the United Kingdom, particularly the RAF, who've supplied logistics, weapons, airburst bombs, all sorts of horrendous military assistance to the Saudi Arabians, actually, to perpetuate this war, which has its roots. These wars don't just erupt out of nowhere, no more than they did in Ireland, the division of my country, the occupation of the British, which led to a 30-year guerrilla war. It doesn't happen overnight. So the fact that the British and the Americans are the voluntary group who are now going to police the Red Sea all of a sudden to protect your microwave or your coffee. We just want to protect international trade. It's absolute bullshit, excuse the French, in my view. This is about defending very lucrative lines of communication in the area into Israel. And remember, then we could talk all day and night about how the British are complicit in the creation of the actual state of Israel, from Sykes-Picot to the Balfour Declaration to these false promises to the Jewish population of Europe, pre-war, that they would give them a homeland if they helped lobby the Americans to come into the war. I mean, people should educate themselves as to what the rationales. None of the pieces on the geopolitical chessboard move without good reason. There's two realities. There's the reality that they peddle to their client media to say, we're defending you and the free flow of transit of goods through the Red Sea. And then there's the real reasons they're doing this, the real reasons. They're also showboating for the Saudis and for the Jordanians and for the UAE, because the Russians have increased exponentially their influence in the Middle East, in OPEC. So this is a chance for the United States and Britain to take, for Britain to take the few ships they have that actually work out of dock and sail along behind in the wake of their superpower friends, the United States. It makes no sense to me whatsoever what these ships are meant to do, sailing two basic fleets into the Red Sea when October 7th happened, which is bizarre. But what is, pretty putrid to me is, where has this concern been when Israel has been committing a genocide in Gaza? There was no dispatch of any resources to even call for a ceasefire. Everybody sat back and said, well, that's fine. So it seems patently obvious to me that when your allies want to perpetuate a genocide, as Britain and America, their ally in the Middle East, their stationary aircraft carrier is Israel. They helped create that state. The United States has given $250 billion plus in military aid to a very wealthy country since its inception in 1948, I think. $250 billion it's given in military aid. And remember, a lot of that military aid went into fighting several of the wars, the 6 Days War, the Yom Kippur War, and various other wars where Israel, after being attacked by its Arab neighbors, no doubt, annexed territory. And, annexing territory is very current. When Russia decides to go into Crimea to protect a Russian population, and the Americans accept that the population of Crimea is overwhelmingly Russian. Many of their State Department reports have said it. Everybody knows that. But when Russia goes in there to protect it from a coup d'etat in Ukraine, in Western Ukraine, where the CIA, we absolutely know, Victoria Nuland, Jeffrey Pike, we actually heard her say it, they overthrew a legitimately elected government. So this is like a theater. It's like a farce. On one hand, you have America saying that they're going to protect the world from destabilizing influences. They're going to defend democracy and the mandate of democracy. So that's unless that mandate is in Crimea, where most people want to be Russian and be under the care and protection of Russia. And they knew that. They've written it in many of dozens of State Department journals. I can list them for you.
And there was a referendum in Crimea, wasn't there, Chay? It was quite an overwhelming referendum, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. And it's also important to know that
more than 90%.
When people say, Crimea is Ukraine, well, I often say to them, well, what was Crimea in 1953? It was in Russia. It was Russian because it was Nikita Khrushchev himself, with very significant Ukrainian links, basically gifted Crimea to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic in an argument over grain prices. He said, well, look, you can have administrative control, but the Russian Navy stayed exactly where they were in Sevastopol and in the fleet headquarters. So this drive-through narrative that the American client media would like to give our listeners about how everything begins on a certain day. Everything began in February 2022 when the Russians intervened in Ukraine militarily. Great powers don't take dramatic actions like that without good reason. You can look back to the Munich Security Conference in 2007 when Vladimir Putin very clearly said, you're pushing us too far. The Americans understood that. They knew that. Great, much brighter people than me, Stephen Cohen, Professor John Mearsheimer, Noam Chomsky, have been pointing out the inevitability of a conflict with Russia if NATO continued to encroach on Russian interests and territory. No more than America would tolerate Russian or Chinese forces overthrowing a legitimate government in Mexico, even if it was corrupt, and then creating a large Russian-Chinese-backed army of 250,000 men over 10 years, terrorizing and victimizing Americans, cultural Americans or ethnic Americans and banning the English language. Do you think the United States would have tolerated that for a month? The 82nd Airborne would have been in Mexico City. And this is the reality of great power politics and realist politics. But what's peddled to the media through the client media, who is exceptionally controlled, as we know, and we don't just make that up. We don't guess that the client media is controlled. We know from things like Operation Mockingbird, where the CIA controlled hundreds and hundreds of journalists directly to peddle a narrative of fear about the Soviet Union, fear about the Chinese, fear about even, black groups in America. So we need to step back and look at the chessboard and say, why are the British and the Americans now trying to flex their muscles in Yemen? And it's completely obvious to me that it's a signal to their electorates. It's a very opportune time for America, particularly, and Rishi Sunak, where food banks seem to be the only growth area in Britain right now. It's very opportune to embark on what they would like to suggest is some kind of Falklands deployment. We're going to go and secure freedom of navigation of the seas in an area where they've completely ignored while they supplied weapons to kill thousands and thousands of children, cause a famine in an area which they basically stirred up the problems in the first place. I mean, when you think about the complicity of the British in the creation of the crisis in British Palestine, and the creation and looking the other way when it comes to UN mandates regarding Israel, when you think of the complicity of both of these players, the fact that they would suggest that they're going to now walk into the neighborhood and save the people that they threw in the water, basically, it's absolutely ludicrous, Patrick. I think people really need to move away from October 7th, move away from dates and reverse back. And it's easy to do. It's all the information is out there. People like you, people like me, we write about it. We're trying to tell people, see the bigger picture. Nothing arrives by accident when this happens. And there's a big game being played right now on the global stage. Russia and China are allied together now. It's an almost, I find it very difficult to see how that alliance will be fractured or go any way other than to increase and strengthen. And this really undermines, American hegemony, and America's most enthusiastic volunteer police officer when it comes to U.S. hegemony is, of course, the United Kingdom, an almost irrelevant global force now in many ways, which will take any opportunity it can to exercise this faux importance on a world stage. The reality is that if they were actually wanted to engage, as in Ukraine, and we saw Boris Johnson being dispatched to Ukraine to make sure there wasn't a peace deal, to encourage Vladimir Zelensky to ban peace negotiations with Russia. And this all happens in the midst of a terrible domestic crisis for Boris Johnson. He's been accused of being a liar, of basically misappropriating state funds, all of which turned out to be true. He had to resign. It's the same for Biden. It's the same for Sunak. Very unpopular people. Joe Biden, almost a laughable, incompetent man. It's almost shameful how he's been led around reading from notes. So it's not an accident that these faux conflicts that they create the problem, then they deploy themselves to solve the problem. And it's all very convenient because domestically, Joe Biden's in a huge amount of trouble. There's no way Joe Biden is going to win an election against Donald Trump. I don't think anybody can convince themselves that this man is capable of even finding his way home if he got lost in a shopping center. Forget about winning an election against a very acerbic, very smart, very tuned in Donald Trump, who's telling people, I'm going to solve the problems. I'm going to get these guys around the table. And what Trump is doing, I think, just to add a bit of note about Trump, I think what's so attractive about Trump, I disagree with Trump on some issues, but I do agree with him that this isn't that complicated. It's not that complicated. Get them around the table, sit down and say, what do you want? What do you want? Do a negotiation. Negotiation is basic. Arguing over your neighbor over a tree, hanging over a wall. There is a way through. We found it in Ireland. People who said they would rather drown in each other's blood than sit in the same room. We did a deal. We ended the fighting. Now, it isn't perfect, but nobody's dying now. It can be done. If we can sit down with the British and their proxies in the north and come to an agreement on this island after, thousands of years, basically, of conflict, it can be done. It can be done in Palestine. A just peace can be reached, but there is no money in a just peace, Patrick. There's no military-industrial complex. There's no political grandstanding and showboating. You don't get to dispatch your fleet to distract from the catastrophic state of your economy, as what's happened in Europe and the wider sort of global economy since these idiotic self-inflicted self-harm sanctions against Russia. So I just urge people to see the bigger picture, see it as a chessboard, step back and try to understand why would they do this? What's the history? What's Britain's involvement in Palestine and in Yemen? And why is America here? America has invested so much in Israel. I mean, of course, then you got the Zionist lobby in Israel, exceptionally powerful in the media, exceptionally powerful lobby politically. We're coming into an election year. Joe Biden doesn't want to alienate the Zionist lobby. Think about it. Joe Biden very famously said, if Israel didn't exist, I'd have to create it. I'd want to create it. He's declared himself as a Zionist. And this is purely for political ends. And in the middle of this, ordinary, very poor, geostrategically insignificant people die, like the people in Yemen and like the people in Palestine. And similarly, the people of Eastern Ukraine. Today, over 20 people were blown to pieces by NATO artillery in a market. And we've got very mentally ill people on Twitter, I've just seen, denying that this attack even happened, and then saying that it was Russia bombing itself yet again. So this is the kind of toxic environment that mainstream media creates by lying to the general public by omission. And this is a key element of how they deploy their truth. This will never be reported. The reality of the background in Yemen will never be reported. Like 4,000 children starving to death. Saudi bombers facilitated and maintained by the Royal Air Force, bombing this civilian population since 2015, essentially, the complicity, after trying to overturn the country. Grant Shapps today also said, I think I saw a video of him saying, we don't interfere in people's. I mean, you serious? A British Minister of Foreign Affairs or Minister of Defence saying we don't interfere. The British only interfere because they're a post-empire, post-colonial power, and the British are desperate to become relevant again after Brexit. So I just urge people, don't take the drive-through narrative. It's always tasty. Like drive-through food, it's very tasty. It's easy to eat. It tastes good. You just grab it, you say good guy, bad guy, and you keep driving. You wind up the window and you throw the bag in the back. Just like food, to actually get your head around what's going on globally, you do need to do a bit of research. You do need to go and buy the ingredients. You got to cook it yourself, and then but it's going to taste much better than this shit you eat when you go through the drive-through. So I'd urge people to see the background, see it as a big chessboard, and then they'll very quickly be able to see what's really happening in Yemen and in Palestine.
That was almost a plug for Just Tasty, period. The new fast food chain in Russia. Formerly,
yeah. Вкусно и точка. Tasty, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah, formerly McDonald's. So great exit by McDonald's there. No, Shay, seriously, October 7th. History began on October 7th. Total gaslighting. February 25th, 2022. Nothing happened before that. 9/11, nothing happened before that, etc. That's the exercise. And I want to bring this because you shared this to me with me offline. And you just mentioned it, okay? And I want to say something quite controversial, how I'm going to frame this. I want to get your comment on whether you think I'm so far off the ledge on my comment. But let's bring this story up on stage. At least 18 killed in Ukrainian strikes in Russian-controlled Donetsk. I mean, just forget about the CNN propaganda framing on that. But the point is, civilians are still being targeted in Donetsk, in the Donbass, and they haven't not been targeted. It's been going on for 8 years, Shay. So a Palestinian said to me a few months ago, they said, well, what's the difference between, well, Gaza is obviously worse in terms of the magnitude of this slaughter, but the people in Donetsk have been hammered from the air by Ukraine for 8 years. He said the difference is we don't have a Russia coming to rescue us in Gaza. That's a pretty strong statement there. But just objectively looking at the dynamics of those two situations.
Well, I don't think that's too strong at all. I mean, living in Moscow, living and traveling across Russia for the last year, and meeting the Russian people, living, eating, working, traveling with them, immersed in this Russian culture, if you like. Russians are quite conservative overtly, they're quite quiet in public places. But when you start to talk to them and understand the people of Donetsk, Lugansk, and these republics, these new territories, as they're known in Russia, or returning territories. I heard a Russian guy called them the other day. He said the returning territories, meaning they were ours and they are ours. They always were ours. He suggested that, you know, people were hoping that this Russian intervention would have happened in 2014. They saw what happened in Crimea, a completely bloodless intervention by Russia into a completely Russian population. People came out and welcomed them. You know, it's very difficult to portray, as the Western media does, you know, this full-scale invasion in 2014 of Crimea. It's an absolute fantasy and fallacy. Most of the Ukrainian army deserted and went over to the Russian side, Patrick. And this is another thing that is not really well known in the West. When the Maidan coup happened, and this triggered a civil war. I mean, any demographic map you want to look at going back 30 years will show you the schism between East and West Ukraine, between the industrial heartland in the East and the, you know, pro-European West, radically nationalist West. Of course, most of those territories, and a lot of them were previously territories of Hungary, Poland, and Romania. So again, zoom out from the chessboard and get your head around the reality. This fantasy narrative, this think tank delusion that Vladimir Putin woke up and said, okay, I'm going to stick a pin in a map. Where will I pick? Let's do Ukraine. Boom. Let's just invade somebody, is absolutely ludicrous. Vladimir Putin is an exceptionally shrewd, exceptionally well-educated, probably the most competent statesman on the world stage today, I'd suggest. Not a you know, a manic lunatic looking for war. Absolutely not. He was totally aware of the damaging prospect of engaging in war, and he still is. And I don't believe Putin wants this war particularly. I don't believe anyone in this in the higher echelons of the Russian government wants the war. I don't think anyone here wanted the war. And that's my opinion. I don't know, but this is my opinion of talking to people. No one wants it. But now at this stage, nearly 2 years in, they know how it has to end. And there's absolutely no ambiguity about that now here in Russia. Because people are now confident. They see that the whole sanction thing doesn't touch them. It's utterly irrelevant other than travel. So, you know, anyone who comes here immediately goes, Jesus, this is a giant farce. This is a totally functioning, open, liberal, normal society. So when you see, when you meet people from the Donbass and you talk to them, their first view is, we wish you should have come sooner. Why didn't you come sooner? So they're not too fawning over the Russians. Say, well, you should have come sooner. We were on our own. We were fighting alone. And that dispels another myth that the Russian army invaded and assisted them. If the Russian army had invaded Ukraine in 2014, it would have been utterly destroyed because there was no Ukrainian army. It was a post-Soviet wreck of an army. The army that fought Russia and has again been defeated probably several times since February 2022 by the Russian army, it's probably been defeated twice, was a 250,000 man NATO-trained army created post-Maidan by NATO. Ukraine is the de facto NATO state. It's like a mistress. It gets, you know, it gets the trips abroad. It gets the gifts. It doesn't get the wedding ring. And conversely, it doesn't get the benefits of the wedding ring because as the divorce occurs now, it's being treated as a nobody. You know, you're just somebody I used to know. As the West tried to compile reasons to pull out of Ukraine, the Ukraine needs to reassess what is victory. Ukraine didn't listen. They drove our tanks onto the minefields. They should have walked onto them. Yesterday, I saw Dmytro Kuleba, this quite repulsive character, talking in Davos, saying, "Look, we're offering the best deal on the international market for war right now. You get to keep your most precious resource, which is your soldiers. We kill ours. Just give us the weapons and the money." Can you imagine somebody saying that about their own people? Can you imagine the European Union? Ursula von der Leyen.
Shay, that's drifting into Maria Antoinette territory there for Kuleva. I mean, it's really insane, bad,
right? Yeah. So what we see right now is a huge awareness in Russia. Dare I say it, the political awareness and education in Russia is higher than certainly higher than the United States and higher than most countries in the European Union. Russian people tend to be, most Russians will start a conversation with, like, I don't want to talk about politics. And 2 hours later, they'll have educated you in great detail about every element of a certain subject. And that could happen in a supermarket, in a bar, on a bus, anywhere. So I think the Russians have learned two things from this conflict. Firstly, that they've realized, well, you know what, we're tougher than we thought. We thought we wouldn't be able to survive this. We thought we had to go on our foreign holidays to Europe. We thought that this would be tougher. And people do become more confident as they see that they can stay on the field. Russia is, as anybody knows from the West who's traveled here, is a highly functioning, very enjoyable, very wealthy country with everything you need to live in absolute comfort here. It's a very stable country socially. It has totally refused to take the pill regarding the woke agenda, this woke mafia that seems to have infiltrated every element of our lives, from educating our kids to deciding, you can become a sheep overnight, all this utterly ridiculous drivel, which again is used as a deflection from failed politicians in the West. They say, well, two men can get married, two dogs and cats can get married and have a kitten. Whatever you want, you can do all of that stuff. The individual has become central to everything regarding political success, while the whole state collapses, the economy collapses. We end up in these ridiculous, endless wars with people we've never even met. Most of our people don't even know where the countries are. So this is all about the deflection of failed politics, in my view. And in Russia, people have just refused to do that. In Russia, you can do anything you want in your private time. You can be gay, you can be straight, you can be trans, you can do anything you like. But the state isn't going to advocate on behalf of any particular ideology, and certainly not going to allow it to become politicized to manipulate one or other group in society. That's it in Russia. You can say what you want. There's nobody here that doesn't have an opinion, including I disagree with Putin. I mean, you can get in a taxi and say, what do you reckon? Say, the war's bad. I don't like the war. Putin's useless. He's very, very much, the majority will say, we have a strong president. We need a strong president. Very much the majority will say, the war is terrible, but it's necessary. We don't want our kids to fight this war. We have to go all the way to Odessa. A lot of people. So there is a huge difference in opinion, healthy debate. And anything else that you hear in the West, as most of our listeners are from, is absolute fantasy and fallacy. And it's deployed by the same media who told you, Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. The same media who hasn't been able to tell us how Hamas managed to send 1,000 heavily armed fighters through the most defended border on earth over a period of 6 hours, how they managed to send 1,000 fighters flying, burrowing, blowing holes in this fence, the most surveilled fence on earth. How did Hamas manage to do that? Kill 1,200 people and then carry 200 or 300 back through the same holes in the fence. And nobody noticed. Nobody seemed to know. I mean, I wonder why the Western media isn't asking those questions, Patrick. I mean, if we want to talk about a conspiracy and be called conspiracy theorists, nobody's still been able to show me any evidence as to how the Mossad, the Air Force, the border guards, the Israeli army, this much vaunted greatest army that ever took to the field on earth, how come everybody was on a day off on the October 7th?
Well, that's a good question. It also begs the possibility of what you just said, is that they're much vaunted as a force, but maybe not as good and not as efficient, not as professional, and not as effective in their so-called deterrent strategy as many assumed they were over these last years. They've slumbered a bit in recent years because they have overwhelming force. But that brings us on to the topic of Gaza. I wanted to get your opinion on. I know you've made a lot of historical comparisons to the Irish armed struggle, liberation struggle, and other armed liberation struggles in South Africa. You've covered a lot of these different things in your reporting. So let's put Palestine and Gaza and Hamas into historical perspective. How would you do that in order to compare to past armed struggles? Because this is the problem, Chay. A few governments have labeled Hezbollah or Hamas as terrorist organizations. They get the political designation, and then no more discussion. No
Yeah.
more discussion. Can't have any discussion about history, about the intricacies of the situation, of who's wrong, who's in the wrong, who's in the right. Can't have any of that discussion. It's a terrorist organization, and therefore, ergo Shay, we can do whatever we need to do, says Israel, to eliminate this terrorist threat to the state of Israel. Put that into historical perspective, and maybe, if you will, perhaps correct the perspective.
Yeah, I think again, I know I keep harping on at this thing. You got to look back into historical context. When, for example, in Ireland, when I grew up, I was born in 71. The war had just started in Ireland, and war in the north of Ireland. It had been bubbling along. Civil War, the revolution in 1916, the Free State was formed. But there was relative peace. But in 69, basically the armed struggle began in the north when the civil rights movement was crushed by the British. The British created an orange statelet, which had its own parliament, which was an apartheid statelet against Catholic Irish people. This was in the 1960s, imagine. And again, the British were preoccupied with much of their collapsing empire in Africa, in Kenya, the Mau Mau, in Yemen, in Aden. My own father was in the British Army. He was in the Irish Guards. He was a guardsman in the Irish Guards, and he experienced this. He often tells me that when he was told that they were going to Aden, actually, they were going to Cyprus or Aden, just shoot them. Just shoot them. Just shoot them first, because you won't get to ask them a second time. You see somebody you don't like the look of it, just shoot them. And this is in the 60s. This is the colonial attitude. And my own father told me this. So when you look at who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, it's who appoints them as such. Okay, look at South America. Look at how the United States deployed its vast wealth and power in South America from the 50s right up until the 90s, funding people like Noriega, funding the Contras, funding the most pernicious groups, while telling everybody, that these were fighting against the scourge of communism. Okay, so these weren't terrorists to the Americans; they were freedom fighters. One of the most interesting comparisons, Patrick, is of course the Taliban. When the Taliban were fighting the Soviet Union, the Taliban were the most. I can show you the most, glowing and fawning articles in the American media about these rugged, good-looking men, these Peshmerga fight, these men coming down from the hills to fight.
The Mujahideen, the brave Mujahideen.
Yeah. So these were the warriors of God. These were great men fighting the Russians with American Stinger missiles, of course. So here's your answer. This is why Hamas is a terrorist group to the Americans, and this is why the Houthis are now a terrorist group. Back when I was a kid, most of the money for the weapons that the IRA bought from Muammar Gaddafi, because Gaddafi supported the IRA, another African nationalist, another incredible character, interesting man who met a gruesome end thanks to Hillary Clinton's looking the other way and working with terrorists in Libya, as they worked with terrorists in Syria, Al-Nusra Front. We've got very famous emails from Jake Sullivan saying, Al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda are on our side in Syria. I mean, so again, people need to get their heads around this. This is a chess game. This is a game. The American State Department and the White House don't care who Al-Nusra killed. They don't care who Al-Qaeda killed. They don't care who anybody kills once it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Once they view it as an asset to be deployed. Currently, Hamas is an asset which is being deployed against Israel, and therefore it will be declared a terrorist group. Remember, the Americans and the Japanese and several governments declared the Azov Battalion, who America now funds with high-tech weaponry in Ukraine, a group of people founded by a guy called Andrei Bieletsky, a hateful Nazi and racist. Their wages are paid today by American taxpayers. As soon as the Russian intervention happened in February 2022, the Japanese government immediately rode back on their decision to define them as terrorists. The whole grimy nexus between Nazism and nationalism which goes back to American attempts to destabilize the Ukrainian SSR post-war, Operation Red Sox, Operation Aerodynamic, where most of the agents dropped into Ukraine were killed by the Russians. It was a catastrophe, but they funded people like Stepan Bandera. They gave him refuge in Germany. This man was complicit in the massacre of hundreds of thousands of Jews, Poles, Gypsies, and ethnic Russians. And you can read about this in universities in Ukraine. That man has hundreds of monuments in his name. They named streets after him. They named the 1st of January, his birthday, as a national holiday. He's on postage stamps in Ukraine. This is what the United States is willing to fund while its proxy, Ukraine, is trying to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. They will do the same. The Americans don't care about the people in Taiwan. They have absolutely zero interest in democracy, in the people in Taiwan, in Ukraine. If the Americans cared about democracy in Ukraine, there would have been an election. There hasn't been an election. In 2019, the US State Department clearly stated that Ukraine was a failed state, that there was extrajudicial killing, that the police were, exceptionally corrupt, that prisoner torture was commonplace. And that's, talking about Pearl Gonzalo Lira, what happened to him. The Americans knew about this. So it's about who decides the good guys and the bad guys are. And again, if tomorrow the Houthis decided that they were going to work with the Saudis and with the Americans and the British to do the bidding of Uncle Sam or Rishi Sunak in the region, they would soon fall off the register of terrorist organizations, just as Hamas will. If Hamas will become the Palestinian Authority, if Hamas will stop resisting this brutal occupation and genocide now, and this displacement and this punitive attack, if Hamas will stop doing that, they would find themselves immediately much like the Palestinian Authority, like Fatah, which is essentially a client state, a free state within Palestine, which is exceptionally corrupt, exceptionally infiltrated. As Hamas, I mean, we were told prior to October 7th that Hamas was exceptionally infiltrated by Mossad. How come they didn't see them manufacturing 5,000 missiles? How come they didn't see them building the launchers? And how come they didn't see them coming across the fence, Patrick? It's a little stone in my shoe, and I'm writing about it at the moment. But again, it always helps to zoom out and understand who's declaring them as terrorist, a terrorist organization. Surely the terrorist organization is the one that's massacring thousands of civilians in weeks. Surely the terrorist organization is the one who facilitates the dropping of airburst munitions onto children in Yemen, the RAF. Surely is that not terrorism? But the difference is who gets to declare them terrorists. As you very interestingly said to our Yemeni guest, you're basically putting sanctions on these guys and you're acting out that mandate. You said we're going to sanction them. We're not letting their shipping come through. So when Yemen says that's terrorism, when Israel murders thousands and thousands of innocent children, bombs hospitals, strafes fleeing refugees, attacks churches, mosques, murders people, that's not terrorism, that's self-defense, Patrick. So again, let's get our heads around who is writing the script here and who's sort of peddling that script out to the wider public. Unfortunately, most people consume this drive-through narrative via the mainstream media, and it's changing, and platforms like yours fantastically give voices like mine a chance to say what we're saying here, and thankfully we can do that. And it's shifting somewhat, I think, because it's impossible in the age of instant news and imagery to deny what's happening in Israel. Can you imagine this happening in the 1960s or 50s? Nobody would even know it was happening, just as nobody knew what Britain's crimes of empire were in Kenya, in South Africa, in Ireland. I mean, can you imagine the cries and screams that were never heard prior to individuals being able to take a film? It's a chilling thought to see how these guys behave before. Because remember, there's only one country on earth who's ever deployed a nuclear weapon in war. There's only two great empires that have killed tens of millions of people. Since the Second World War, the United States has killed over 10 million civilians in dozens of wars, coups, targeted assassinations. They've overthrown governments. The British and the Americans are the two great empires of occupation, destruction, and theft in modern history. And it just so happens that they are now the two great policemen of the world. The United States decides who gets to have a nuclear weapon after being the only country that's ever used one. What does that tell you? So this is about understanding, when possession is 9/10 of the law, when you exert massive influence, even in criminal courts of justice. When the ICJ said it was going to investigate war crimes in Iraq and may indict American citizens, the Americans actually said, if you try to do that, we'll bomb your court. I mean, people have to hear that. We'll bomb your court. Yeah. Okay. So that's that then. That's quite obvious. Any country that wants to, assist anyone dissenting from the United States narrative is going to get bombed. They're either going to get bombed, or there'll be a coup, or worse, they will crush their economy with the debt-based dollar, which they've been doing for hundreds of years, basically. This is how they've controlled post-colonial Africa. When the British moved out, the Americans moved in with the dollar to prevent any national unity. They killed people like, they destroyed Nasser, they destroyed Gaddafi, who wanted a gold-based currency for Africa. He ran he had an incredible social welfare system. He banned mortgages, he banned interest on mortgages for young families. The man was a very innovative man, of course, portrayed as a monster in the West. But you got to ask yourself, why did they portray this man as a monster? Why are they portraying the Houthis as a terrorist, and why are they portraying Hamas as the terrorists? If the Israelis hadn't seized the Palestinian territory in such a brutal way and dehumanized them, the October the 7th would have never happened. The IRA would have never existed without the British-sponsored apartheid in my country. It would never have existed. And likewise, most of the resistance groups on earth that are declared terrorists by the American empire wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the real terror, the real terrorists doing their work. And when you control the global currency, you just can't escape this. So I think, again, it's about looking at the bigger picture, see it for what it is. When they write the rules, it's the American rules-based order. And I came up with this one the other day. The international rules-based order is basically America makes the rules and America gives the orders.
That's it. Yeah, you're the first person to explain that in one sentence, basically. I'll add a couple to that. By the way, international law backs armed liberation struggles under occupation by any means necessary, and that's upheld by the international courts of justice as well. So that's the Palestinians and even the Russian representative to the United Nations, Polyansky, articulated this point as well, that they do have the right to defend themselves if they're being occupied. The occupiers, however, are in a much more precarious position. They do not have the right to, quote, self-defense if they are illegally occupying. And that is the conundrum from international law perspective that Israel falls into. So I'll add to your list, which we could expand that list out. You're talking about those hypocritical narratives in history of Vichy France. Do you know France has not designated Hezbollah as a terrorist organization? Because if they do, politically, they have to condemn the French resistance in Vichy France, who the Nazis called a terrorist organization.
Yeah, well, of course. In Europe at the moment, and I did a piece on this, which I tweeted a small little film on it. They've just had a big court case in Italy about the fascist salute, the Roman salute, the Sieg Heil salute. It's the brand, right? So they've basically said, well, it's not really illegal to do it unless you're doing it because you hate black people or you're a Nazi. So that means you can walk down the street in Italy now doing the famous Roman salute. I'm not going to do it because some Ukrainian will screen grab it and, I'll be called a Nazi. So, as they do. So, I mean, this is the reality now in Europe. I mean, and it's very difficult for European countries to condemn displays of Nazism, fascism, this brutal ideology when they're funding it in Ukraine. They are funding it in Ukraine. They're funding a radical nationalist government there who has, openly adopted remembrance, celebration, and the sort of the elevation of people like Roman Shukevich, Stepan Bandera, And these innumerable, the Nachtigall battalions, the 40th, the Galician division of the SS, which was comprised solely of Ukrainian volunteers. So all of this is fine now. They were just a bit misunderstood, Patrick, the Nazis. They weren't really that bad. We should have just let them deal with the Russians and everything would be fine. I mean, this is the kind of attitude you see now, particularly in the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, these highly aggressive people. They recently deported an 82-year-old man for speaking Russian and voicing his views. You don't get free speech. This machine that purports to be defending free speech is the most, insipid and dangerous threat to free speech we've seen since Nazism, in my view. That's my view, my absolute view. In my own country, hate speech laws that will criminalize you having anything on any device that could be construed by a court as offensive or hateful. Anything. So if you have a documentary on your phone about the SS, as a historian or someone who studied history like me, because you're writing about it, and the police come to my house, they can seize my phone, my wife's phone, my children's phone, all our computers, take me to a court and say, this is hateful. And I hadn't spread it anywhere, nothing. It's the most draconian, Orwellian, dangerous law, I think, in our constitutional history as an independent state.
Is this not the same totalitarianism that the West decried and derided the Soviet Union for and then waged a Cold War over? Is it not the same thing?
Well, as you know, Patrick, the West, the collective West, has become the Soviet Union without the free healthcare, without the free holidays, without the big space program, and without the transport system that works, and the cheap food, cheap free medicine. I mean, where will I stop? So the West has become the Soviet Union without all the good bits. It is the Soviet Union, but the transport systems collapsed, the economies are in shit. Socially, we're in big trouble. A lot of violence, more weapons than human beings in the United States. Guns killing more children in the United States than cancer every year. And what is America doing? It's spending trillions of dollars on wars it probably helped start. So I'm going to show you a trick. I'm going to stick a knife in you, and I'm going to pull it out, and then I'm going to stitch it all up and bandage you up, and you're going to thank me for it for the rest of your life. And if you ever ask anyone else for an opinion, I'm going to stick it back in. Then I'll pull it out. So this is the insanity of this neo-conservative hegemony, which is peddled around the world by the United States and eagerly followed by the poodles in London. It's just remarkable.
And talking about historical revisionism, I know we had spoken about when this story sort of crept up. I'm going to put an article here from the Bild newspaper, and this was previously a memorial to Dresden. I got a couple of before and after pictures here. Let me give you the before picture there, Chay. There's an inscription there. It's got it basically, showing respect to the victims of the firebombing of Dresden during World War II. And here's the after picture, Chay. And I know you're one of the first people to flag this up. There's no more inscription, Chay. It's gone. It's been sandblasted. Now, I know there's some explanations as to why this might be, but it is kind of harrowing if you think about it. But your comment on that one.
I mean, look, you and I kind of collaborated a little bit on this when it first came up. We had discussions saying, could this be real? Could it happen? We kind of were looking for sources to verify it, as we try to make sure before we share anything or comment on it that it's real. I thought it may be photoshopped. I couldn't believe that in Germany, a country which is so racked and directed by its collective guilt about the war, the Second World War, in a very negative way and in some positive ways, of course. I couldn't believe that it was real. But then very quickly we found out it was real, and you and I kind of hemmed and hawed, should we take it down? Should we do it? But it was real. Of course it was real. They sandblasted this memorial. What's fascinating is what the memorial was about. And it's about, the memorial marks the place where a pyre was built on which over 6,000 civilian bodies were disposed of, burnt, after the Allied firebombing of Dresden in 1945. Now, there's a huge debate as to whether Dresden had any military significance whatsoever. There's a huge debate as to whether this was warranted. Of course, the killing of, I think 25,000 civilians in 3 days. Is that ever justified? Is that ever justified? I mean, I know the Israelis are now justifying it by saying, well, there's no innocent Palestinians. And I've recently posted as well. I said, well, there was a time when people said there was no innocent Jews. And the same ideology spurred the most grotesque demonstration of inhumanity in living history, the Holocaust of the Jews. But here we see the Germans very insipidly and creepily sort of trying to wipe history out. We don't want to remember this because this was done by our best friends now, okay? So our best friends, firebombed one of the most ancient cities in Europe, destroying immeasurable historic buildings. Remember, the Nazis never bombed Paris, Patrick, strangely. But the Allies bombed Dresden and they wiped it out. They destroyed the city completely, killing tens of thousands of civilians. It was said, and British troops said, and British commentators said at the time that it was an unnecessary target. This was a signal to the Soviet Union. As many scholars would suggest that bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a signal to the Soviet Union and to the world that America is a nuclear power. And there's no better way to show that than to save American troops, of course, because a land invasion of the Japanese islands would have been very costly. But the Japanese were defeated. You could have put a blockade around Japan and they would have had no impact. You could have just hemmed them in until they said, okay, we quit. But developing this weapon, which was due to be used against the Germans, and then the war ends and everyone's worried about the Russians. The Russians look pretty tough, don't they? They accounted for, remember, the Red Army, the Soviet army, accounted for 75% of the combat fighting power. They destroyed 75% of the combat power of the greatest army ever fielded in human history, the Wehrmacht. It was the Soviets that won that war. You can say what you like. I think it's indisputable. They destroyed the fighting combat power. Now, they paid for it. Over 11 million Soviet soldiers died. But they were well aware of this uncomfortable alliance that they'd formed to defeat the Nazis. It was over. The Russians had arrived in Berlin. What are we going to do about the Russians? It's very famously, Patton said, let's turn around and use the remaining Germans to chase them to Moscow. This is General Patton, the great general. He wanted to turn the Allied and German armies around and fight the Soviets. So this was a signal. And the Dresden attack was a signal. And people know this. That's why it's been very covertly erased. And it was actually Maria Zakharova, the Russian foreign ministry spokesperson, who came out and condemned this as unacceptable, right? So she condemns it. The British take it completely silent. The Americans say completely silent, and the Germans come up with some excuse that a trainee sandblasted it by accident. It doesn't look like an accident to me, but it all fits into this same narrative that once now that Russia's the enemy again for some reason. I mean, Russia's only done what America has done dozens of times, what Britain has done probably hundreds of times. That's all Russia's done, is to intervene to protect its people. This is the Russian position. We protected our people. We warned you not to stimulate this wasp's nest on our border. You did. And now you're reaping the consequences. And terrifyingly for the West, their only weapon to try and stop Russia, because they can't defeat them militarily, it's an absolute fantasy, which just won't happen without all of NATO facing off against Russia. And even in that case, China could join Russia, and we've got World War III, and nobody wants that. No one's sane. Some people in Latvia, Lithuania, but then again, sanity up there is in rare supply. So when you consider all this, it's all feeding into a narrative to sterilize the Allied political impact in Germany post-war. And remember, what the American mission was in Germany was to keep the Russians out, keep the Germans down, and keep the Americans in. And it's exactly what's happened. Drop Nord Stream into the mix. This arterial lifeline of cheap, reliable, absolutely high-quality Russian gas into the engine of the European economy, Germany, with its engineering, with its auto industry, with its manufacturing power, cut off, destroyed. A perfect opportunity to cut off Germany, who had warm relations with Russia post-war. After the end of the Second World War, most Germans accepted that it was the Russians who sacrificed most to free them from Nazism. As in France, as in Britain, Take that poll again in 4 years ago, and all of those countries think their own countries contributed most to the defeat of Nazism. It's remarkable. And this is all part of a sterilizing process by a client media. Remember, the same people who own and operate the media, the editorial power of the client media, as I call them now, not the mainstream media, the client media, because they predate on the same funding for advertising and contracts from the centralized US intelligence community via the US government and the British government for compliance. That's what you get. You comply, this, if you notice the narrative, the term Russia's totally unprovoked full-scale invasion of Ukraine, it appeared over a 1-week period a year ago in all legacy client media. That doesn't happen by accident. I mean, this is the way, if you own the rule book, you write the rules, you pay the people who challenge the rules, you're paying the referee, because that's meant to be the media, the free media. The free media in America used to ask questions. Remember Watergate? Remember Vietnam? Remember John Kerry standing up and saying, who are you going to ask to be the last man to die in Vietnam? There used to be an inquiring media in the United States. And now it's down to people like you, Patrick, people like Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate, these great people who decide we have to speak out, we have to speak up. Because this machine that is an integral part of the war machine, the justification of war, the licensing of war, the demonization of the enemy, as in the Palestinians, it's all an integral machine. And erasing history is a key part of that as well, Patrick. And that's what we've seen, I think, in Dresden.
No, absolutely. There's even an element of this. I wouldn't even discount, Chay, that Germany taking their official government stance of genocide denial regarding the ICJ South African case in The Hague. That's the official German position, as is the official Canadian position, the U.S. position, and the British as well. This kind of inconvenient narratives from history, the firebombing of Dresden, gratuitous carpet bombing of a non-strategic city, for what reason other than just complete domination and a type of a genocide of sorts, at least in that confined area. Looking at Gaza, this is a huge embarrassment. This is what you see, Chay, with authoritarian regimes in history, is this sandblasting of history.
Yeah, it's a very good pun, really, because they literally sandblasting history. Another interesting one. I was a big World War II geek back in the day. I collected a lot, I read a lot, I studied it. On D-Day, the Allied Air Force killed 12,000 civilians in the first 3 days in their bombing of the D-Day beaches and the Cannes region. 12,000 French civilians were killed. It's not a number most people would know. You see, people just don't want to look below the surface. So it's like, we were fighting a terrible power. So these were all sacrifices which were made in the contribution to that. Okay. So it's this illogical dismissal of human life. I mean, it doesn't count when you're on the wrong side of history. And so this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to recalibrate history as an absolute truth, that there's no way you can challenge it. You can't challenge the fact that you can't go beyond October 7th. You can't go beyond October 22nd. It's this absolutism. We can't go and ask, what does the, great expansion west in the Americas, what does it all mean? How do we get to where we are? Because if we don't understand the past and we can't model the future from the past and say, well, come on, look, we've learned from this. And we've had American lawmakers and even staffers in the White House coming out in the State Department writing an open letter at the start of saying, bombing Palestine, attacking Palestine isn't going to work. I'm an Irishman. I remember as a kid, a young boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old, watching the news of what was happening in the country and watching British soldiers beating people, the RUC, the UDR, what they were doing to the people in the north. And I remember feeling myself, as soon as I can, I'm going to join the IRA. I mean, naively, I was a kid. This was an ambition. I thought, I'm going to join the IRA and I'm going to show those bastards. And this is the terrible frustration we felt in Ireland, in the South particularly. The Southern government stood back and allowed the British basically to do as it wanted because it was warned. You intervene here. I mean, there were plans for an intervention by the Irish Army, which is tiny. It's not even an army. It's basically a militia. No air force, no armor. It would have had no impact other than to maybe bring in the United Nations. Mm-hmm. But of course, because it was Britain there would never have been a United Nations intervention on Britain's doorstep, on its own territory. They would have never allowed it. So the Irish would have been wiped out, as they were. There were pogroms against Catholic Irish in the north. This what led to this idea that there could be an intervention from our side in the south, which had this free state status. Basically, it was a republic, but it was very much reliant on Britain economically and etc. It was a very complicated situation. It's a bit like Fatah and Hamas in the West Bank. In Gaza, excuse me. So when we see all this, how they're mixed in, you just got to understand, as long as the United States and Britain control, number one, the narrative, number two, the rule book, I don't believe, sadly, that there's going to be any conviction made against Israel in the ICJ. I just don't think it's possible to happen. I'd be absolutely astounded if Israel is convicted of any crime or there's any judgment made against Israel. I will, eat my hat. Now, I get it wrong. We all get it wrong. And I would be delighted to have got it wrong. But I don't believe for a moment that an institution, which has basically been and proven itself to be NATO's legal firm in the past, I find it very difficult to believe that NATO's law firm is going to now, admonish a key ally in the Middle East, which polices the dysfunction created by the same people now steaming their great warships into the region, telling the world they're going to fix the problems they created probably hundreds of years ago, Patrick. I just don't believe it.
Well, we hope, at the very least, if that judgment doesn't come down the road, that South Africa's provisional move to get an emergency measures. I personally, Chay, I think the moment South Africa stood up and laid that out in front of the world without any interruptions on a global forum, that's never happened before against Israel.
It was wonderful to see.
Yeah. It's powerful. It's really powerful. So we live in hope that some good might come of it. But I share your skepticism, of course, of everything in The Hague as being a tool of Western hegemony, basically. Look, I think we're going to wrap this segment up. Chay, I know you've gone a little bit. You've given us some extra time here. We very much appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
I speak on behalf of our audience as well. Chay Bowes, international journalist based in Russia. Chay, give us a shout out of how people can find out and see more of your work.
Yeah, well, my Twitter is probably what I use most. It's at Bowes. We also have a news site called The Islander Reports, me and Jerry Nolan, and that's growing on Telegram. It's kind of big. We try to do more analysis, long form stuff, and a bit of humor as well. We're also looking for interesting stuff. So if anyone wants to find us on The Islander. The link to the website's on my Twitter page, and my Twitter's at Bowes.
Yeah, we're retweeting The Islander at 21 Wire as well. So you can link all that through Shay's Twitter account, or X Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
Formerly known as Twitter. You can find all that there. So Shay's producing a lot, also doing some great work with RT. His archive there is incredible. So you can follow him. He's very, very busy and very, very much on the pulse of what's happening geopolitically. So I do recommend following Chay. Thank you very much, Chay, for joining us on the Sunday Wire Live this week.
Thanks, Patrick.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That is Chay Bowes. Listen, we're going to skip the break right now, and we're going to go straight to our sort of overdrive segment. I don't know. Well, if we're able to bring on a couple of guests, but we might be able to bring a few people on if we can for this last segment. But Basil Valentine, perhaps, if he's available. Also, Hesher, Brian McLean from Alternate Current Radio Network. We're going to stay on video for this whole broadcast. Normally, we hop over to the audio streams at Alternate Current Radio, but we've got the audio streams going on all of our different syndicated networks, but we'll also keep the video streams going as well this week. Basil Valentine possibly might join us. Drop a little hint to our producer. Do drop Basil Valentine the line, see if he's available to come on to join us on StreamYard with our syndicated broadcast as well. So listen, in terms of housekeeping, we want to We want to give a shout out to some very generous people who have helped us for a winter fundraising drive. Once a year, we do a winter fundraising drive at 21stcenturywire.com. We'll put the details along the bottom. If you look at the banner scrolling just below below the screen here, you'll see we run this every year, and this is what funds our operation for the next year. So we've been doing this for a few years, and it's been absolutely invaluable in keeping this going. So listen, if you like what we do, if you like the content that we produce, 21st Century Wire, as well as our shows, our content that we have there, including the Sunday Wire, which is this show, our reports. We're also doing syndication through 21st Century Wire as well. We got an incredible audio and live audio, but also recorded podcast syndication network, which we run on probably 36 channels, audio subscription services. So this is becoming very popular. We're getting a lot of traction there as well. But look, support us in any way. You can donate, or you can subscribe and become a member at 21wire.tv. That's our member site. That's for people who want to support us monthly. So we do this every year. We'll be wrapping up the winter fundraising drive in February. But if you want to get involved, we really appreciate it. Anything you can is greatly appreciated and put to very good use. We've also hired some part-time staff recently, and we're planning to hire another as well in the coming weeks. So we're building our team out in the background, and you can see what that means in terms of video production output. There's a lot of content we're putting out on multiple platforms as well, and it also helped to grow our presence here on X, Twitter, one of our multiple accounts, the corporate account, of course, at 21Wire as well, which I manage. So your support is invaluable, and we really appreciate you guys. Those of you who have stepped up to help us, thank you very much. And we also have some great affiliate sponsors as well. I have to mention New Dawn Magazine. It's one of the best print publications in the world. Alternative print publications, full color. There's not that many left. They're one of them. They're based in Australia. It's an incredible team down there. New Dawn Magazine. Follow them on X, Twitter as well. These are great people. They've been doing this publication since 1991. So they've been in the game for a very long time. We also do features articles for them. They've got a 2024 New Year's edition out, which I offered some predictions in there, 5,000-word feature. The writers in there, they've got everything from geopolitics. There's a little bit of esoteric in there as well. So pretty much everything you'll find in New Dawn Magazine. Fascinating publication for people with an open mind. Very entertaining as well. Great physical, beautiful print publication. Also, we have VPN affiliate sponsors, including Surfshark. Great app, great product. Surfshark offering incredible deals. That's one way you can also support us. And Clive Carle Health Products, which he does for supplements, dietary supplements, nutrition, minerals, anything to help you optimize your health. Clive Carle, fantastic. We have Clive on the show previously. We'll get him on again. He's been incredibly busy. We'll try to bring Clive on for a live Q&A session. I think we'd love to do that here on these live streaming platforms. Perhaps that might be something we can do in the next couple of weeks. We'll still be trying to catch up and do that with Clive, but he's got a great product range. And if you shop at his store, and you do that through the links on our site, click through to Clive Carle on 21st Century Wire, or Surfshark on 21st Century Wire, or New Dawn Magazine. That also helps us out on the back end as affiliates. So that's another way you can support us. That's a win-win. You get a great product, plus you support our work as well. So there's some great options there. And I want to bring on to the stage, if he's available, just give me a thumbs up, Mr. Brian McLean. If he, I see a big thumbs up coming from our friend Hesher. Is going to join us on the line right now. We're going to bring him on stage. Mr. Brian McLean, aka Hesher, joining us right now. Hesher, how you doing?
I'm good. Good to be here with you, Patrick.
Great to have you as well. I dig the hat. That's a familiar baseball cap, TNT Radio. Brian's also got a show on TNT Monday to Friday, State of the Nation, great U.S. domestic politics issues, things happening in America. Brian, how's the coverage? Are you getting into election mode? I know the whole Iowa thing blew up, blew up in some candidates' faces, actually. But that's all happening. New Hampshire, that whole Farrago, that's going to come pretty hot in the beginning of the week. So yeah, you getting your election bona fides tightened up for the next couple of weeks?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been ongoing. We've been speaking with Senate candidates, Congress candidates. We spoke with Kate Monroe out of the San Diego area. She's a Marine Corps veteran running for Congress. So yeah, we've been running through it quite a bit. We've also spoken with Liz Harrington, President Trump's spokesperson, um, uh, Wayne Allen Root, the Wayne Allen Root, of course, interesting guy and friend of Donald Trump. We've had him on the show. Yeah, so we've definitely been covering this. We've been talking with Rich Rubino a lot. He's a political analyst. So yeah, we've been having a pretty good time over there. Also spoke with an attorney named Steve Barrick, who's taking a lawsuit for his client JD Bowles. And JD Bowles is one of the people who's he was like a real estate guy, right? Like he has people that lease his properties who lost their jobs during COVID, and then he had all these properties sitting around that were not paying him, and he had no way to re-rent them out without going through the 6-month, processes because of the eviction moratoriums that were put in place by Diktat. So he's taken this court to civil rights. He's saying that that the government essentially violated his client's civil rights and in the name of COVID policies. So was really excited about that interview because he fully recognizes that the government will take these same emergency practices and apply them to climate emergencies or whatever. So he's very hopeful, that they can set a precedent here on that. So yes, we're very much into the election cycle as well as just important things that are happening around the nation. So yeah, that's what we're doing over there on TNT. We got a big week this week. Jay Dyer's going to join us one day this week. We've had a great conversation with Mark Anderson last week. I mean, we're doing 6 interviews a day, so 30 10 to 20-minute hits a week. So we're really cranking it out over there. It's a very high-paced show that Steve and I and our colleagues are doing.
So what's your take on the 2024 election right now? I mean, like, I know there's not much going on the Democrat side. They've canceled the primaries. I mean, like, talk about election meddling on the Democrats, but like on the Republican side, a lot of hype, a lot of money to DeSantis. The last 8 months, they burned through $200 million, mate. Like, and he did what was that? A distant second in Iowa. He's not polling very well in New Hampshire right now. Like, what do you make of this? And like Nikki Haley being elevated as this kind of moderate.
Yeah,
I mean,
Nikki Haley just burning through Reid Hoffman's millions of dollars right now. Reid Hoffman, another swamp ghoul, another technocrat ghoul, someone who's just been abysmal. And it's like we speak with Ken Cuccinelli quite often, and Ken is the president of the Ron DeSantis Super PAC, and he makes a really good argument for Ron. He's really good at his job, I got to say. He keeps the faith up, and he points out the things that DeSantis ranks higher than Trump on. He's not wrong about many of those things, and he was there with Trump, you know what I mean? So like, and he's not a never Trumper or anything like that. He just points out that, I urged Donald Trump to do something about this border. I urged Donald Trump to not give Fauci and Brinks the power that they wielded. You know what I mean? He makes some really good points, but you're just not going to stop the magic of Trump. He just came through at 51% in Iowa. I mean, there were 100,000 people there, which was about 68,000 less than the previous time. But I mean, it was in the negatives. It was like, colder than a witch's boob in a brass bra out there. So, a lot of people didn't make it out. But I mean, that's a huge turnout. He flew straight to, I found one of the most things I found most interesting was he flew straight to New Hampshire, and Vivek did as well. And Vivek, pulled out right after Iowa, clearly by plan, completely ready to back Trump. And
Yeah.
then he does that speech in New Hampshire with Trump standing right behind him. I've never seen anything like this before. A presidential candidate who just swept the Iowa caucus with, young Vivek, like him or not, think he's a shill or not. There's, your mileage may vary on these arguments, but I'm hearing all of them and involved in some of them too. But he's sitting there talking about the deep state, intimating that Trump is in extreme physical danger of harm and shenanigans and lawfare and potentially assassinations. And these kind of things are now kitchen table talking points.
Mhm.
I mean, imagine 5 years ago if a presidential candidate that swept that bigly was, as a Trump word, swept that bigly, was standing there with someone stumping for him using the kind of language that you hear in alternative and independent media. So, again, another tick in the timeline there as the Overton window sort of shifts as far as like acceptable political communication around the dinner tables for normal Americans. So I couldn't help but notice that was a kind of a new factor, or a growing factor.
Yeah, it does. Vivek does hit those notes, doesn't he? He does hit the notes very well. So yeah, he's out. He's brought his 8%, thrown it into Team Trump. I think never back down. I think that's the name of DeSantis' super PAC. Yeah, I think they're going to back down after New Hampshire.
They may have to. Yeah,
unfortunately, it's 5%. That's just not good in terms of polling. I mean. So that means that if it becomes a 2-horse race after that, Super Tuesday's coming up. If Nikki Haley doesn't carry her home state, and I kind of think she might not, then that's curtains for her. But is she really running for president, Hesher, or is she auditioning for the establishment to make her the vice presidential de facto candidate, or is she campaigning for 2028? What do you think?
This is a tough one, Patrick, because this kind of all depends on what happens in 2024. When Wayne Allen Root was on, he said that since last January, he's been saying that Biden will not be the candidate, and that somewhere between now and March,
Mhm.
they're gonna come up with the scenario that we've talked about before. Biden's gonna get COVID. Biden's gonna eat too much ice cream, and his brain's gonna explode. Biden's gonna, maybe the impeachment cases will get too ugly. Maybe the Hunter things will get too ugly. Maybe we'll have a giant terrorist attack here in the United States somewhere before the election. Maybe we'll have disease X come through, like all the ghouls at Davos are talking about this last week.
Maybe he'll get indicted in the International Criminal Court for complicity and genocide of Israel. I mean, there's so many different things that could happen to this administration. They're so exposed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if they're going to pull all the cards. They're going to pull all the Trump cards and say we can't have an election. I mean, that's what's happening in Ukraine, and that's the democracy that we're supposedly defending. So, why not have a black swan event and a pandemic and, a larger scale conflict popping off? And it's really starting to feel like that's what they want. That's what they desire. Because, Biden's only polling at like what, 28 to 33% amongst Democrats, even
among Democrats.
So it's really bad. And what Wayne Allen Root said is in line with what Joel Gilbert has been telling me for 2 years now. He's been telling me this since 2022, that Michelle Obama is going to be the candidate and that Gavin Newsom will likely be the running mate. And that's going to be, and he makes a really good argument. He's written a book and a documentary about it. And so it could go that way. I think that's more likely than a Biden candidacy. The only way a Biden candidacy works is if they steal the election again. And then the other option is we're just not going to have it. We're not going to have it, and we're going to go into some sort of martial law or something like that, because that really feels like where they're pushing everything.
That's a handful of black pills you just threw out on the table,
Well,
Hesher. I mean,
happy Sunday.
my goodness gracious, like that's a lot of black pills to swallow. Yeah, so I mean, gosh, what that would be just a nightmare ticket, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, and don't forget we got the alien crap going on too. They're still fully pushing the alien thing. That event out of Miami a couple weeks ago, hunt every cop in the nation there. Weird videos floating around. No one can tell what's real, what's fake, because this is deep fake. What is this? A portal opened up in the mall. Did you see the video of the portal?
No.
Yeah. There's grainy, crappy video of a greenish, glowing, large figure walking around outside the mall, and then inside the mall, there's grainy, crappy footage of a yellow orb appearing, growing to like the size of, like, the one that Arnold Schwarzenegger came out of in Terminator. And
Am I detecting suspicion and skepticism in your voice?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, we could just be, moving into a parallel universe where life becomes a 80s B movie.
Yeah.
And hey, that's not too bad actually, because
I'll take it. I mean, I'll take the Warriors over Red Dawn any day.
we've had the training, we grew up in the 80s, so we'll cope perfectly fine if that's the case. If that's the dystopian revelation, we're good for that.
We just get our Wolverines t-shirts and hats, and we'll go to work,
That's it. Knee socks are coming back as well, so like this could be the thing. So white sneakers and knee socks are back in style. So are headbands, and wristbands are back in style. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I've seen some.
Wristbands.
Seen those rocking
You've
around.
seen some of the rocking wristbands, mullets.
21 wire wristbands.
Oh yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, the mullet. Next thing you know, Hesher mullets are going to be back in style.
Oh, they're back in Texas. They're here right now.
They never went out of style in Texas.
True, but they seem to be a little more bold with it now. It's like, I'm Joe Dirt. What of it?
Rocking a mullet. So yeah, we called it the soccer rocker. That's the soccer rocker. Yeah, the mullet. That's sort of a cultural motif there that it had its moments, definitely. So yeah, look, the world's getting stranger. You seem to be coping with it fine on your show State of the Nation on TNT. And the Boiler Room, of course, you guys delve into more of these sort of, let's say, crevices of reality on the Boiler Room, which is on Alternate Current Radio. Give us a shout out of your programs. Where can people see you, Hesher? Monday to Sunday, where do you reside?
Okay, so Monday through Friday on TNT with State of the Nation. That's noon Pacific, 2 Central, 3 Eastern. It's a 2-hour program with Steve Hook and myself. So catch us there at tntradio.live. And by the way, I also updated. I have a mea culpa to give to the audience here. I gave Elon Musk money. I'm sorry. But I couldn't upload my video clips without being a full-on Twitter member. So I now have a blue check mark, and I have a list of video clips up there that I uploaded last week. So if you haven't been watching State of the Nation and you want a flavor, go to Twitter, follow me on X. It's at Hesher Media, Hesher Media. And give me a follow over there. I'm trying to break through the old shadow banning here. I'm hoping maybe since I gave them my ID. I hate how they make you take a picture of your ID to be a real person on there, but who am I hiding from at this point? Nobody. I got nothing but great media and news to share with people. So at Hesher Media over there, there's a lineup. I dumped a bunch of video clips from today's News Talk State of the Nation in there. So get on over there if you want to get a flavor for the show and join us for that live show. And then on the Alternate Current Radio side, join us for Boiler Room. We got a great cast for Boiler Room per usual. People cycling in and out. Whoever's available each week joins us. We got Corey Drayton, we got Mark Anderson, we got Grunt Smash, we got Spore, we got.
What's the time? What's the live time slot on Boiler Room?
Live time slot is somewhere around 9 p.m. Eastern, usually. Pretty much when everybody files into the green room, we launch it. But rockfin.com, where the Boiler Room channel is where our archives are and where we always stream live. We're working on our Rumble account right now, but Rockfin is sort of the mothership for our video podcasts. and Spreaker.com under Alternate Current Radio is where you'll find the audio versions.
Yeah, we managed to stream out live on Rumble for the first time today. I think we're live right now. So I managed to crack that sort of impossible code there for simulcast here with our current distributor. So yeah, so that works. I'll share that knowledge with you on the back line. So hopefully that will be helpful. Hesher, Brian McLean, host of The Boiler Room on Alternate Current Radio and State of the Nation on TNT Today's News Talk. Follow him, Hesher Media, at Hesher Media. That's on X, Twitter. And you'll find him on your more respectable video sharing platforms and social media platforms as well. Thank you, Brian McLean, a.k.a. Hesher. Appreciate you joining us live on the Sunday Wire this week.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yes, and those of you watching on X right now, just jump over and go at Hesher Media. Follow Hesher right now. You want to give him a follow. He's going to be uploading a lot more content and a lot of good, relevant stuff, especially in the 2024 election. Hesher's show is going to be sort of a go-to place, I think, for a lot of people. So I'm going to highly recommend that show during the 2024 election circus. I'm not going to say election cycle. It's an election circus, folks. That's what we're in for this year. So looking forward to that. And I want to say a big thank you to our guests, of course. A big thank you to Chay Bowes, who was very generous with his time. We really appreciate that as well. And Yasser Almohallil, a diplomat from Yemen representing Ansar Allah. He was brilliant as well. Really appreciate him joining us. Very difficult connection, as not everybody in the world has fiber, has Google Fiber, unfortunately. But we managed to get a strong audio connection with Yasser in the first hour. So that was great to hear the policy that coming directly from Ansar Allah regarding what's happening in the Red Sea in the United States and Britain declaring war on Yemen, to get their perspective so people know what their diplomatic position is, because we're not seeing that. Those conversations are not happening on the mainstream media. So how could our diplomats and foreign policy experts in the West know where Yemen's coming from if the Yemeni delegation is not allowed on Western mainstream media? That's why we seek out some of the guests that we do, because we think it's important that if you are in the West, that you are better informed. And we're hoping that some of that information trickles up to people in diplomatic positions, so that we can come to maybe some amicable solutions to some of the things that we're seeing right now happening around the world. That's just me. That's just my sort of viewpoint. So anyway, listen, folks, I really appreciate you guys joining us. Hello to everybody in the 21st Century Wire chat room, the new green bubble. Great to see you guys in there. We've had some good responses there. Look, if you want to see more of this program, more of the content we do at 21st Century Wire, please support us during our winter fundraising drive. We really, really need it. And going forward, we talked about our digital TV for smart television channels that we're developing right now. We have already hired somebody to help with that. So that's in the works. And that's all because of you and the generosity of some of the people who support this. And we've got some big donors as well who have made some big contributions. I really appreciate it. We'll put some progress up. Subscribe to our email shot at 21stcenturywire.com. We'll give you updates on that. And also support the Alternate Current Radio Network. This is an independent network, an artisan network. It's been going strong for a very long time. They host this program, the Sunday Wire, and many other great programs such as the Boiler Room. You saw Hesher, you heard from him. Those are the types of people that are behind ACR. Definitely an organization that you want to be supporting. So listen, folks, that's all we've got time for today. That's the show. Really great to have you guys with us. We did the whole show continuously on video this week. Give us your feedback. Tell us if you liked this format, if you liked it on audio and video. We might not do it exactly this way next week, but we're just kind of doing some experimentation with different types of formats over these next few weeks. So give us your feedback as well. We really appreciate it, and we'll make some changes and do accordingly. We will tighten certain things up. But we're just kind of getting our feet wet on the video simulcast at the moment. So bear with us, and hopefully we'll get there. We'll get there in the end. But we can't do it without you, our audience. Love you guys. Take care. Have a great week. I'll see you. Some of you will see me live or hear me on TNT Monday to Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, starting tomorrow. So it's going to be a busy week. I hope to see you guys there. Take care.